Hello everyone. So this video is a third part or the last part of this topic, and previously in the previous video we discussed the first two types of sentences जो कि हमारे पास simple sentence and a compound sentence, and in this video we would be discussing the last two parts of the types of sentences, और वो है हमारे पास complex sentence and a compound complex sentence. So थोड़े से tricky हैं मगर मुश्किल बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. सो अगर आपको नहीं पता कि सिंपल और कंपाउंड में क्या डिफरेंस है वो तो फिर आपको प्रीवियस वीडियो पहले देखनी पड़ेगी और बहुत आसान है. इट्स जस्ट अबाउट इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉजेस एंड एडिंग इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉजेस, एंड वो आपका सिंपल और कंपाउंड में फ़र्क है. सो कॉम्प्लेक्स सेंटेंस इज ऑल्सो वेरी इजी टू अंडरस्टैंड, और इसमें सिर्फ एक फ़र्क ये है compared to a compound sentence, that जैसे compound sentence में दो independent clauses add होते हैं to make up a compound sentence, in a complex sentence you need to add one independent clause with at least one dependent clause. That's it. So when you add up an independent clause with one dependent clause, then it makes up a complex sentence. It's so easy. अगर आप चाहें you can add more dependent clauses to it if you want to add, if you're making up a sentence which is comprehensive, which is lengthy, तो फिर इस केस में तो आप you can add more dependent clauses to it. लेकिन याद रखें that complex sentence का structure ये है that it needs to contain at least one dependent clause and it needs to be linked with at least one dependent clause. वन इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉज तो मैंडेटरी ऐड करना, और उसके साथ आप एक या एक से ज्यादा डिपेंडेंट क्लॉज लगा सकते हैं. याद रखिए दैट डिपेंडेंट क्लॉज बिगिंस विद अ सबऑर्डिनेटिंग कंजंक्शन. सो दिस इज जस्ट अ prominent feature, a prominent हाईलाइट जिससे हम आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हैं कि एक डिपेंडेंट क्लॉज है. एंड सिंस एन इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉज कैन नॉट स्टैंड ऑन इट्स ओन, इट इज ऑलवेज इनकम्प्लीट एंड इट नीड्स टू बी अटैच्ड विद एन इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉज. इस वजह से हम इसे अटैच कर रहे हैं. ठीक है, सो याद रखिए कि वन independent and one dependent makes up a complex sentence. इसमें कोई ऐसी मुश्किल बात नहीं है. Let's analyze these two examples. अगर मैं आपको यहाँ first example बताऊं, she went to the class even though she was sick. So over here, even though she was sick is a dependent clause. Why? Because हमारे सामने एक identifying feature ये है, उसका prominent feature ये है that it begins with a subordinating conjunction which is even though. So if I say that even though she was sick, but then what happened? It seems incomplete and it needs to be completed with the help of another clause. So इसको support चाहिए, इसको complete करना है. ये अपनी nature में incomplete है and it is not conveying a complete thought or a complete idea. So this is the reason why we say that it is a dependent clause. So even though she was sick, she was regularly taking her classes, or she was regularly going to the college. So आपने आगे इसको complete करना है. अब आपकी मर्जी पहले independent कर दें या पहले dependent clause लिख दें, इसमें कोई limit नहीं है. So she went to the class is actually the independent clause, and then you have to add a dependent clause. In the next example we have, as Jawad was arriving to work, he realized he forgot his lunch. So over here the sentence begins with a dependent clause. As is actually the subordinating conjunction here. So as Jawad was arriving to work, but then what? What happened when he arrived to work? तो इसे अब आपने complete करना है with one independent clause, and it is he realized he forgot his lunch. So इस तरह से आपने एक complex sentence बनाना है, which is very easy and simple. So complex sentences use a comma after dependent clause if it begins the sentence. याद रखिएगा कि अगर आपका sentence dependent clause से ही start हो रहा है, then you need to show the segregation and separation with the help of a punctuation mark, and that would be a comma here. ठीक है, so let's suppose अगर आपका dependent clause sentence begin हो रहा है, when I was going to the market, but then what happened? You need to complete it with an independent clause. ये तो समझ में आ गया है, लेकिन इसमें आपने separation या फर्क शो करना है with the help of a comma. Easy peasy, बहुत आसान है. Now we have compound complex sentences. देखें, compound complex sentences को हम compound complex इसलिए बोल रहे हैं because it has one chunk, one part taken from the compound sentence and the other half taken from the complex sentence. So when we mix these two together, so it forms a compound complex sentence, right? So इसका कुछ हिस्सा जो है वो या एक कॉम्बिनेशन है ये एक कॉम्प्लेक्स सेंटेंस का और एक कंपाउंड सेंटेंस का, दोनों के स्ट्रक्चर्स और फॉर्म्स को कंबाइन कर दें तो ये आपका बन जाता है कंपाउंड कॉम्प्लेक्स सेंटेंस। और इसमें क्या है, इसमें क्या चीज दोनों से ली गई है? देखिए कंपाउंड सेंटेंस में जिस तरह से दो इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉजेस जुड़ते हैं सो वो कंपाउंड सेंटेंस बन जाता है। सो सिमिलरली ये स्ट्रक्चर इन्होंने पिक कर लिया, टू इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉजेस, और जिस तरह से कॉम्प्लेक्स में एटलीस्ट एक इंडिपेंडेंट के साथ एक डिपेंडेंट क्लॉज होना चाहिए और उससे ज्यादा भी हो सकता है, सो ये वाला हिस्सा उठा लिया, राइट? सो यू नीड टू ऐड टू इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉजेस with at least one dependent clause to form a compound complex sentence. As simple as that. Two independent clauses attached with at least one dependent clause. So ये 2 plus 1 का structure बन जाता है. अब आप चाहें you can add plus, like plus more आप कर सकते हो उसमें dependent plus dependent clauses कर सकते हो. You want to add one or more than one dependent clauses, it's perfectly fine. लेकिन basic standard structure ये है that two independent clauses plus one dependent clause or even more than one dependent clause makes up a compound complex structure. A compound complex structure contains two independent clauses and one or more dependent clause. That's it. So ये part compound से लिया गया है, ये part complex से लिया गया है, दोनों mix कर दें तो compound complex बन जाता है. Very simple. Let's observe and analyze an example here. If he got the job, he would have to commute 50 miles to work, so he decided the job was not worth it. So यहाँ जो first sentence begin कर रहा है, जो first clause है, that is a dependent clause. Why? Because it begins with a subordinating conjunction if. If he got the job, but then what? इसके आगे क्या है? इसको आपने complete करना है. So he would have to commute means travel. So he would have to commute 50 miles to work. ये आपका एक independent clause हो गया. So he decided the job was not worth it. ये आपका second independent clause हो गया. So one dependent plus two independent clauses makes up a compound complex sentence. Very simple. Let's analyze the first example. As she felt guilty for missing her friend's birthday, she took her out to dinner the next day and they had a great time. So इसमें जो first part है, that is a dependent clause. Why? Because it begins with a subordinating conjunction, which is as she felt guilty for missing her friend's birthday. But then what happened? Now this is something you have to complete. She took her out to dinner the next day. This is the first independent clause combined with another one. And they had a good time. They had a great time. So this is the second independent clause. So one dependent clause plus two independent clause, ये आपका बन गया एक compound complex structure. आप चाहें तो इसमें एक से ज़्यादा भी dependent clause add कर सकते हैं और आपका sentence थोड़ा ज़्यादा lengthy हो जाएगा इस वजह से. So it's very easy to understand. आपके पास 4 types हैं. Simple, compound के बाद है हमारे पास complex, and then you have compound complex sentences. So यहाँ पे ये चीज़ complete हो जाती है और आपका पूरा sentence structures का जो topic है ये भी complete हो जाता है. Thank you very much.